Welcome to Esoterica, the podcast, where we discuss the obscure, offbeat, and unusual. I'm Chris Schultz.
And I'm Aaron Christian.
And today's episode is sponsored by OK Soda. It's not great, it's just okay. So, I'm just went with it. So, I'm happy to say we have a not only a very special guest, but a returning guest to our show today. I'd like to welcome Homer Flynn, who is the president of the Cryptic Corporation and manager of the art collective known as the Residents, to discuss an album. But before we get to him, we're bringing back a tradition that had gone by the wayside of sampling a adult soda with each episode.
Yes, and now we're both adults.
Yes, it's
so
legal.
It's fine.
So we're going to do this. Today's is Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers, brings us Shipping Out of Boston, an amber lager. You want to read what's on the side there, or do we want
Oh, I'll read what's on the side.
Well, I crack one open.
Yeah. Shipping Out of Boston celebrates the rich and storied manufacturing history of the New England. Not of the New England, but of New England. We built this beer with local ingredients inspired by the factories that were once world suppliers. It is a malty, sweet, and lightly hoppy amber lager that pays homage to the past while manufacturing a bold future.
Mm.
So
these are local guys to us. They're from Framingham. It's got a nice smell to it. And pretty. You got to pour slow because it's got a rich head.
I am pretty behind compared to you.
I cheated while Aaron was reading the side of the can.
Ooh, fragrant.
Family owned and operated. Nice dark amber ale.
Amber lager.
Is this a lager? Oh, it is a lager. I'm sorry.
That's why we got it, because if it was an ale, I'm not drinking it. Oh, what a head.
How to get ahead.
Have you drank it yet?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, and as this episode is coming out, I think it's important to note that this is going to be our last episode of the year we've all come to know and love, 2020.
The year of Esoterica.
The year of Esoterica. So a lot of shitty things happen this year, and most people are prepared to see 2020 go into the rearview mirror and burn in hell. But we celebrate 2020 because it was the year of our birth, our show.
Nope,
anyway.
we were both born this
year. We were both. So cheers to Esoterica.
Cheers.
And goodbye to 2020. Oh, I'm a fan.
This is good.
Yeah, it's good.
This is good.
You know what else I'm a fan of?
What's that?
The Residents.
The Residents.
The Residents. And I'm very excited to say that we have a guest rejoining us today. Once again, we have Homer Flynn, who is president of the Cryptic Corporation and manager of the art collective known as the Residents. How are you doing today, Homer?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, Chris. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, I think when we talked to you last, it was May, and everyone had just gone into lockdown. Since then, almost your entire state is burned to the ground. There's been protests in every major city across the country. Have you survived in one piece the last 8 months?
Yeah, I have survived actually amazingly well. There was supposed to be a residence tour in May, which was rescheduled to May 2021, and now I don't think that doesn't seem likely to happen. There was also one scheduled for Europe for January, February 2021, and that's been pushed back. But what actually happened was that opened up a lot of schedule, a lot of time for everybody to start working on a residence film project that has been in the works forever. And that has moved along at a very nice pace. And at this point, it's in post-production. Everybody's feeling pretty good about where we're at this point. So we've made good use of the time.
Awesome. Well, the reason I asked you on today was I wanted to pick your brain, take you back 40 years to 1980 at the release of Goosebump, which was an EP.
Right. it was actually one side of an EP, which was a 12-inch EP. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that the Residents, they had just released Eskimo, and the Residents have never been one to take themselves too seriously, and Eskimo for them was one of their more important projects at the time. But then they kind of went, well, yeah, that's cool, but let's do a disco version of it. So ultimately, they did Diskomo, which was you taking some of the main themes from Eskimo and setting them to a disco beat.
So a little background here. Homer touched on Diskomo, which is the single that Goosebump is B-siding. So Diskomo is a disco version of Eskimo. Eskimo is an album that was put out by the Residents prior to this. I was looking for a release date. I think it was 79, September of 79. It's an ambitious and sort of serious sounding concept album where it's they use homemade instruments and chanting against backdrops of wind-like synthesizer noises and sound effects. It's supposed to be Eskimos speaking in Inuit telling stories, and of course it's the Residents. It's a whole made-up thing. Really fascinating album, one of their more commercially successful albums. So as Homer mentioned, they decided to do a little lighthearted disco version of like a medley from the album. So let's give that a listen. So, young Padawan, what did you think?
It's the Residents. Like, it's exactly what you'd expect to come from them. It's not like it's bad. It's definitely unique, and I appreciate what they do and like why they do it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot. Like, if you're a fan of the Residents, I think you are a cool person, and I like that about you. But it's not my thing.
Yeah, it's not your cup of tea.
And neither was Star Wars until like you made me watch it. I'm like, yeah, this was a good movie. So like maybe it's one of those things where you just got to sit with it for a while and then you'll like it.
It'll grow on you.
Yeah,
it could.
It's unique.
So this track, I think, if you're familiar with Eskimo, it's a fun distillation and sort of silly look at Eskimo. What I like to picture, because this is the thing about the Residents, is like I'll oftentimes think of them as a soundtrack to insanity. Like, I'm picturing being at a roller skating rink or at a disco, and this comes on. Like, that's messed up for everybody there.
Yeah.
And like, that to me is a beautiful thing.
It's messed up for everybody there.
So as Homer explains, this is the single, and then Goosebumps is the B-side to that. So let's go back to Homer and hear about what we came to talk about, Goosebump.
But then the problem comes up. Well, what are we going to put on the other side? And somebody came up with the idea. I think maybe it was Hardy Fox, my ex-partner, who suggested, "Hey, well, why don't you guys make a children's album with a bunch of children's instruments?" And boy, they flipped out. Oh, that's great. That's great. So, everybody got in the car and went down to Toys R Us and, loaded up with children's instruments and came back. And, to me, one of the real pluses of it is the fact that Snakefinger was around and he was available to work on it. So he adds a lot of really nice detailing that wouldn't be there otherwise.
Yeah, his guitar work really stands out on that. One of the things I noticed in the liner note was that one of the original discussions was a whole album. Is there, to your knowledge, any unreleased tracks hanging around? Anything that didn't make the final cut, sitting in a vault?
Well, I'll put it this way: not to my knowledge, but on the other hand, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe there was something stuck back in there somewhere. Um, what's been happening recently is that Hardy unfortunately died a couple of years ago, and he retired 2 years before that. So I wound up inheriting um, a huge. He was the keeper of the archives, uh, both product archives and tape archives, audio archives, and so I have been working with a guy named Scott Colborn in Seattle, as well as Richard Anderson, the product manager at Cherry Red, to go through all this material and find this huge treasure trove of material that a lot of which either I didn't know about or I had forgotten about, and so something like that could pop up, out of this searching through the archives. Um, I haven't heard about it yet, but it could happen.
Yeah, I was curious about that because I know at least with the Preserve series, they've been focusing on albums, and their Residents has an incredible body of work, not just the studio albums, but a lot of EPs and singles, and it would be kind of cool to see some of the smaller stuff make it a remastered.
Yeah. Like I say, whether that's there or not, I really don't know, but it could be.
Now the album definitely has it's children's music, and then it's presume it's run through adult effects in the studio to give it that sort of atmospheric.
Right. I mean, I think they figured out. I mean, I think the concept at first was to do it, all with children's instruments, but I think they figured out pretty quickly. Well, there's only so far we can go with a little toy piano and kazoos and whatever. And so ultimately they went into all the effects that are harmonizers and reverbs and everything they had at that time. And once again, that kind of souped it up a lot.
Yeah, this album for me was special. It inadvertently got me into the Residents because someone had said you should check out this band. They do this really creepy record of children's music, and the person didn't remember the name. So I think I got the Big Bubble, Wormwood, and Residue do before I got to Goosebump, and at that, I was completely sold.
Yeah, cool.
And one of the interesting things is that Goosebump is kind of eerie. The thing that I've always really appreciated about the band is when they're unironic with the version of a song, it really brings out the creepiness underneath.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think that was something that they really enjoyed doing, mainly because it was so kind of low risk. For one thing, it was the flip side of Diskomo, and it wasn't like it was an album. They just didn't see it as something that was terribly important, and something that they could really have fun with.
Yeah, and I think we might have touched upon this when we talked before. Great artists have an evolution through the period of their careers, and like I think I've compared the Residents to Nick Cave before, where he started off sort of post-punk goth, and then he's become an elder statesman of the rock scene now. And the Residents seem to have gone from a little more fun. I don't want to say frivolous because they've explored a lot of concepts from the beginning, but they're certainly much more serious now. Any thought about returning to sort of that light and fluffy, just having fun with something?
Well, I think in some ways, they may have touched back into that to some extent from their point of view, with their most recent album, Metal, Meat and Bone, where they're doing these reinterpretations of these blues songs, and once again, it's kind of like, we can kind of do whatever we want to with this. And so I think for them, they felt like they kind of touched back into some of that at that point.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to take a minute to talk about the awesome folks at Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way. In fact, it's the way that we make a podcast. Let me explain.
It's free.
There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more.
And you can make money from your podcast. Best part, no minimum listenership.
Ooh. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
It's so cool. We found the service. We started using it. We're making podcasts.
Yeah, making podcasts, making money, having a good time.
So listen, you want to get you out there. You want to be heard. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thank you.
So definitely a different take on Mother Goose.
Yeah, it was good though.
So I like that these are broken into themes. Like the first set is disaster, so it's disaster-related fairy tales. One of the things that they were shooting for was to bring back the original sinister overtones of nursery rhymes. Like Ring Around the Rosie, that's a song about the plague.
Yeah.
Like it's dark shit.
Right. Well, so I like too. So they brought in Snakefinger, the only Englishman they know. But a lot of these rhymes were of English origin. So you know they and a lot of the time those themes just became Ring Around the Rosie, like you said, it's a happy,
you know, and now
sounding thing.
Like and Mother Goose, obviously that's something that predates the Americas.
Yep.
I'm wondering, are there any distinctly American like nursery rhymes? There's
Lizzie Borden grabs an axe and gave her.
Well, yeah.
Is that,
Johnny Appleseed. Well, I mean that's a story, but I'm like, think about the nursery rhymes that you heard growing up. Like, maybe Lizzie Borden, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's that? Hopscotch? So
yeah.
A jump rope.
I have to think more about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to burp very loudly because of the beer. So why don't we dive into the next track, which is titled "Plants." Ooh, that last part was stress-inducing.
That like was creepier.
Definitely unsettling.
Yeah.
Snakefinger, kick-ass solo on "Mary, Mary, Quite Contrary." You know what that reminded me of too? Being a parent and having a child who grew up in the aughts. We spent a lot of time watching the Teletubbies. Did you watch Teletubbies at all?
Oh yeah,
No?
yeah.
Do you remember the megaphones that would come out of the ground?
Yes.
And I always thought they were creepy as shit. Like they were weird. And it was the same sort of thing. It was this disembodied voice. Mary, Mary, quite contrary.
That's the thing you found creepy about Teletubbies? Not the fact that there were creatures with televisions on their stomachs, or
there's a lot
or
to
a
unpack.
child in the sun.
A lot going on the Teletubbies. And also the megaphones coming out of the ground seem to suggest some sort of organization that predated the arrival of the Teletubbies, like the Hatches, the Dharma Initiative on Lost, like something that was going on there before they got there, which is even creepier.
Oh my god.
Way too much time thinking about the Teletubbies.
Clearly.
So the next track on Goosebump is Farmers.
A woman McDonald had a farm, and on that farm had some sheep. With a and a here, a there, a everywhere.
Also disturbing.
Yeah, it's just all disturbing, but I kind of like it.
I remember one time my parents were up in Maine and we were house sitting for my sister and her heterosexual life partner, and Carrie and I were all over there. We went swimming, we were hanging out, and we were mostly in the backyard hanging out, but in the living room, I put this album on and I just turned the volume to the max and put it on loop. So anytime you went into the house, it was just randomly playing, and it was very unsettling.
It is unsettling.
Which I think was the intent.
Yeah.
So the last track on here is called Twinkle. So
it's about the little star.
The little star. It's probably a good bet. A fitting coda to the album.
Yeah, there was one note where you could distinctly tell. I assume it was in a minor key that they made this, but it was like a dime, where diamond would be. It just like it was that probably half step down, so you could tell it was like that sinister. It's weird how if you change one note to something, it just like changes the feel completely.
Yeah, it really does. And they're really good at that. I go back to the Hank and Stars album where they do Sousa marches, and it's good stuff.
Oh.
So I kind of hinted when we was talking to Homer about when you read the official description on the Residents website about this album, originally it was envisioned as a full-length album of children's tunes. And I'm going to make a presumption that they decided to take those tracks and they sort of made a medley, which is what we ended up getting. But it begs the question, is if there's unreleased tracks out there? So Cherry Red did release a Residents preserved edition a few years back that includes the Goosebump on it. And there was some unreleased material from the Eskimo album, but no unreleased tracks from Goosebump. So if anybody at Cherry Red is listening, I think what the fans would love at some point, I know I would love, like I know the focus is on the preserved edition of the albums, but the Residents have a lot of EPs and one-offs, and I'm sure there are different takes and demos and unreleased materials with those that I think would be really, really cool to hear. So just saying that. So now let's return to Homer and see what is on deck for the Residents next. So 2020 is almost to bed. You mentioned you have the movie is in post-production now.
Right.
Hopefully that's something we'll see in the next few months maybe, or
yeah, I mean the good thing, or one of the good things, not that there are a lot, but one of the good things about the pandemic is that it kind of takes the pressure off everything in a certain way. And really for the Residents, I mean, they're studio people. So for them to actually have time to go in and try to, polish this up as much as possible with post-production, that's actually a good fit for right now. Mm-hmm. And these things they're so much promoted and marketed around film festivals, which while they aren't non-existent, they're all virtual at this point. So I think they're just going to take their time. I think they've set like a loose deadline of early mid-spring to get this done. Mm-hmm. I know they're working on the soundtrack now, but they certainly aren't feeling any pressure. And if indeed their American tour which is scheduled for May of next year. If that was to happen, well, that would change things.
Yeah.
But with the schedules still being open, like I say, they can afford to take their time. I know they are starting to think about another album, and pretty soon that will start pressuring things more. But for now, they're happy just to kind of move along at their own pace and let it kind of open up and develop the way it wants to.
Yeah. Awesome. And that was going to be my next question, if there was any thought of a new album at all coming up.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened is that the soundtrack, working on the soundtrack for this, has all of a sudden opened up a door for what they might want to do with the next album. And they excuse me. They had some ideas for the soundtrack, and the nature of creativity often is that you have ideas about something.
Bless you.
Sorry, I don't know where all that's coming from. You have ideas about something, and then you start trying to implement those ideas, and then it's kind of like, yeah, well, that's not working. The implementation is not nearly as interesting as the ideas seem like going into it. And so they wound up taking a different approach towards the soundtrack work, but they kept thinking about the soundtrack idea, and that has now led them in a direction for the next album. And once again, they haven't done anything yet, but they feel like this could be, another door, another way to go when they want to do another album.
Awesome. It's fantastic to see new stuff is still continuing to come out.
Yeah. I mean, so much of creativity is learning how to follow the twists and turns that the process brings to you. And the residents are pretty good about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank Homer once again for taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure chatting with him. And that's it for us for season 2 for 2020.
Yeah, for 7 more days?
7 more days.
Our week off turned into this episode for you.
Yeah, if you listen to our last episode, we were like, goodbye, farewell, that's it. But this had actually been on the deck early on for the season and was getting bumped. So just wanted to get out. I'm trying to squeeze in an album residence.
An album residence.
So, I haven't had much to eat today, and I have had a entire beer, so I'm feeling that.
I'm only halfway through. I wasn't trying to pull a Chris here.
I had a thirst. So I've been hoping to squeeze in a Residents album per season. So that completes this for season 2.
Now, with that being said, that means that if season 2 ends next week, we'll be beginning season 3.
Yes.
Which is a big milestone for us because it's the 3rd season.
The 3rd season, and we'll be coming, and during season 3, we'll be hitting our 1-year anniversary.
Yes, in February.
When we started this little thing. And for 2 guys that just had an idea about talking into microphones, I think we've come up pretty far since then.
I think we have. Now we have 2 microphones.
We have 2 microphones.
We didn't start with microphones at all.
If we have a turntable, it would be a Beck song. So. And we have we're planning some really cool stuff for season 3 that we're looking forward to. And I guess until then,
stay esoteric.
A teddy bear might think, I sure like being furry. A stuffed dog might think, bow wow, bow wow. A pretend stuffed person might think, hey, I don't have to go to school. I never have to get a job. But I am rather small, and I have no elbows or knees. Oh well, I'm sure things are going to be okay.